I'm Emily, and the morning my father handed a brand new SUV to my younger sister while I begged for college tuition, I realized I wasn't the daughter. I was the backup plan. They thought I'd swallow the insult like I always did. But that day, something snapped. And the version of me they raised to be quiet, she's gone. Stick around because the house they once stole from me, I sold it right out from under them. But first, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Let's see how many of us know what it's like to be the family underdog who finally bites back. They say Tampa is sunny year-round, but that morning the light felt cruel. It streamed in through the kitchen windows like a spotlight, illuminating every crack in our family's perfect image. My father was already seated at the table, sipping coffee, with the slow satisfaction of a man who thought he'd done something wonderful. Next to him sat my sister Lauren, 18, blonde and blessed with the kind of smugness only a favorite child can wear. She was twirling a spoon through her yogurt like it was a crown she didn't earn. "Emily," Dad said, smiling as I walked in, "sit down. We've got something to celebrate." I sat, but I didn't smile. I'd already sensed it in the air, something off. My stomach was turning, and it wasn't the scrambled eggs Mom overcooked again. "Lauren just got her license," he continued, glancing proudly at her. "So, we thought she could use a little independence." He reached into his pocket and out came a key fob. Shiny, silver, still in plastic, my breath caught. "You didn't," I said softly. He did. With a grand flourish, he tossed the keys into Lauren's hands. "Brand new Hyundai Tucson," he said. "All-wheel drive, midnight blue." "Oh my God," Lauren squealed, springing up to hug him. "Are you serious?" I stared, my throat burned. I hadn't asked for much, just a conversation about whether they could help me pay the rest of my tuition deposit next month. The state school offered me a scholarship, but it didn't cover everything. I'd even put together a spreadsheet. "What about my tuition?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but inside it felt like shouting underwater. "I emailed you both last week, twice." My mother didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh, Emily, don't ruin this moment. You're always making things about you." I blinked. "I'm making things about survival, about not dropping out." "College can wait," she said breezily. "Lauren needs mobility. She's a teenager. It's dangerous taking the bus." "And I'm what?" I snapped. "A woodland creature hiking to campus in the rain." "Don't be dramatic," my mom said, finally looking at me with that familiar mix of annoyance and judgment. Lauren giggled. "You are being a little intense." Her grin was the worst part. It wasn't surprise, it was expectation. She knew she'd get the car. She knew I wouldn't get help. She'd been smirking for weeks, and I hadn't seen it until that moment. Something in me cracked, not loudly, not with fireworks, just a small tear where the illusion used to be. I looked at my dad. "You told me we couldn't afford anything extra." "Well," he said, avoiding my eyes, "circumstances change." I pushed back from the table. The chair legs scraped the tile like a scream. "Enjoy your mobility," I told Lauren. "I'll figure out how to pay for my future while you take selfies in traffic." She rolled her eyes, but I didn't stick around for a response. I walked out of that kitchen without slamming the door. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a tantrum. I let the silence speak for me, and I made a vow to myself as I stepped outside into that blazing Florida heat. They'd never get the chance to humiliate me like that again. If you've ever worked 3 part-time jobs and still found yourself counting quarters for coffee, then you already know what the start of my college life looked like. By the time August rolled around, I had left Tampa with nothing but a beat-up duffel, a battered heart, and a fire I didn't fully understand yet. My parents didn't help with the moving van. Lauren didn't even wave goodbye. But I didn't need closure. I needed momentum. I landed in Atlanta 2 days before orientation and moved into a dorm that smelled like old pizza and Lysol. My roommate, Jessa, was friendly but distracted. She had parents who sent care packages with handwritten notes and Uber gift cards. I had granola bars and a schedule so packed it felt like I was sprinting through each day on borrowed oxygen. My mornings started at 5:45 a.m. at the downtown bakery where I opened up shop, wiped down counters, and pretended to smile while rich customers argued about oat milk. After classes, I worked the front desk at a tutoring center, answering phones and restocking whiteboard markers. On weekends, I cleaned apartments for people who called me sweetie but never learned my name. I was tired, bone-deep, aching tired, but also alive. At night, when the dorm was quiet and the hallway lights buzzed low, I'd sit in the library under that one flickering lamp and bury myself in textbooks that weighed more than my baggage. I wasn't the smartest girl in the room, but I was always the last one to leave, and I started to notice something. The more exhausted I got, the sharper I became. As if pressure wasn't breaking me, it was forging me. One night in particular sticks out. It was just after midterms. I hadn't slept in nearly 36 hours. Jessa was out on a date. I had 3 essays due, and my hands were trembling from too much caffeine and not enough food. I stared at my reflection in the dark window above my desk, hollow eyes, hair pulled back, lips cracked from dehydration, and I whispered something to myself I hadn't said out loud before. "You're going to make it out. You're not them." That night, I got up and pinned a note to my bulletin board with a thumbtack from a ramen box. "No one's coming to save you, so become your own damn hero." I didn't realize how much that mindset would change me. At school, I started to build a reputation. Professors noticed I turned in papers early. Classmates leaned over to ask if I could proofread their presentations. By the second semester, one of my professors recommended me for a paid research position, small hours, but better money. It felt like someone had cracked open a window, and finally I could breathe. I didn't call home much. Not because I hated them. I just didn't know what to say anymore. Every conversation with my mom felt like a performance I was too tired to audition for. Lauren posted Instagram stories of beach weekends and girls' night spa trips with captions like "blessed" and "grind never stops," which I found ironic, considering the only grind she knew was at the nail salon. They never asked how I was managing, never offered to help. I think part of them expected me to fail without them, and that quiet little thought that they were waiting for me to crawl back became my fuel, so I pushed harder. Each dollar I saved went into a spreadsheet I obsessed over like it was scripture. I cut corners ruthlessly, ate canned soup for weeks, rode a bike in the rain to avoid bus fare. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine, and slowly the tides began to shift. By the end of sophomore year, I had enough saved to stop working weekends. I applied for competitive internships. I landed one with a small tech startup run by 2 women who didn't care that I wore thrifted clothes or carried my lunch in a reused yogurt container. They saw me. More importantly, they respected me. And maybe that's when it truly began, that faint flicker of belief that I could build a life with no strings. A life no one could hijack. A life that belonged to me down to the bones. I used to think I had to earn my family's respect. That if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, gave enough, maybe they'd finally see me as more than a footnote to Lauren. But sitting in that midnight library with cracked knuckles and coffee-stained notes, I started to want something else entirely. Distance. Not just physical, but emotional, financial, spiritual. Independence wasn't a dream anymore. It was the goal, and I was willing to sacrifice anything to get there. Graduation day in Atlanta felt like walking through soup. The humidity clung to my skin like doubt, but under my tailored navy blue suit, I held myself taller than I ever had. I wasn't just graduating. I was crossing a finish line no one thought I'd reach. While others clutched diplomas for their Instagram feeds, I had something quieter but more powerful. A job offer in hand, savings in the bank, and my own name printed on every success. I didn't invite my parents. Not because I was trying to be cold, but because I knew what their presence would bring. Performance, comparison, and Lauren snapping photos with captions like "my big sis is finally catching up." Instead, I stood alone in the crowd, clapping for myself. And it was enough. 2 weeks later, after settling into my new job, I did something wild. I bought a used Lexus, nothing fancy but clean, reliable mine. I'd saved for over a year, planned every dime. The first time I wrapped my hands around that steering wheel, I didn't cry. I grinned. Then, with more confidence than sense, I drove down to Tampa for dinner. It had been almost a year since I saw my family in person, since the SUV incident, and I was curious. Not hopeful, just curious. Had anything changed? Spoiler, it hadn't. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house right as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The Lexus gleamed beneath the street lamp, freshly washed and humming like it had something to prove. I hadn't even turned off the engine when the front door opened. Lauren stepped onto the porch. She wore designer sunglasses on her head, though the sun had nearly set. Her long acrylic nails clacked against her phone as she scrolled mid-step. Then she looked up, caught sight of my car, and gave me a slow once-over. No hug, no smile, just a single icy line. Trying to show off now. The words hit harder than I expected. I killed the engine and got out, brushing imaginary dust from my sleeve. "It's not about showing off," I said quietly. "It's about showing up." She laughed, a sharp little sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, congrats, guess all those late-night sob stories finally paid off." I stared at her, really stared. She looked the same, but something had hardened. Or maybe it was always there, and I just learned to see it now. "I didn't come here to fight," I said, walking past her toward the door. "Just came for dinner." Inside, the air was thick with garlic and tension. My mother barely glanced up from stirring sauce. My dad gave me a gruff nod, then went back to watching some political rant on TV. "No, we're proud of you." "No, how have you been?" Just silence, and the underlying sense that my presence disrupted the usual hierarchy. We sat down to eat. Lauren flipped her hair and scrolled through her phone during most of the meal. My mother asked about my job, but only in the vaguest terms, as if each answer was a trigger she didn't want to pull. When I mentioned the firm's name, my dad grunted. "Still in Atlanta." "For now," I said. "Might move closer to the lake eventually." That was the first time Lauren's phone hit the table. "The lake?" she asked. I nodded, careful not to show too much excitement. "Just browsing, quiet places, water nearby." My mother frowned. "What's wrong with the city?" "Nothing," I said, "but I want something that's mine, peaceful." Lauren snorted. "You sound like one of those people who writes their own inspirational quotes." My fork paused in midair. I looked at her calmly. "And you sound like someone who thinks sarcasm is a personality trait." Her eyes narrowed, but I smiled. My mother broke the tension with a forced chuckle. "Let's not start anything." But it had already started. Not a fight. A shift. They still saw me as the girl who left. The one who broke the family script. The one who was supposed to come crawling back, asking for help. Instead, I'd shown up in a Lexus in a suit with a quiet sense of self no one could explain. And it unsettled them. Which told me one very important thing. I was finally doing something right. It was supposed to be a simple dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, garlic bread, and awkward small talk. But somewhere between Lauren picking at her salad and my father complaining about gas prices, I decided to stop playing small. The silence after I set down my glass was long enough to make everyone look up. "I bought a house," I said. 3 seconds passed, maybe 4, then chaos. "You what?" my mother barked, as if I'd announced a crime. Lauren's jaw dropped. "Like, a real house." "A small one," I said. "By the lake, outside Atlanta, needs a little work, but it's mine." My father coughed hard into his napkin, covering what might have been a swear. My mother blinked rapidly, like she was solving an equation that didn't compute. "You just bought a house, like that," she snapped. "Without talking to us." I almost laughed. "I didn't realize I needed a permission slip." "You can't just make decisions like this on your own, Emily," she shot back. "I think that's exactly what I can do," I replied, calmly slicing my meatball. "I worked for it. I saved. I didn't ask for a dime." Lauren leaned back in her chair. "So that's why you came down here, to gloat?" I shook my head. "I came down here because I wanted to share something that mattered to me." "You always have to be dramatic," my mother muttered, tossing her napkin down. "You could have just emailed a photo." That stung more than I wanted to admit, but I didn't show it. Because beneath their irritation, I saw it, the truth they couldn't admit. They were no longer needed. For years, they wielded control through money, through guilt, through the silent implication that I'd never quite make it without their help. Now I had something solid, something they couldn't erase or outshine, ownership, and that terrified them. "I move in next month," I said softly, letting the words hang in the air like perfume. "There's a deck facing the water, big oak tree in the back. I think I'm going to hang string lights." Lauren scoffed. "So now you're into rustic Pinterest living." I smiled. "Now I'm into peace." My dad finally spoke. "You don't have to do this alone, you know." It sounded kind, but it wasn't. He was offering a leash disguised as love. I know, I said, but I'm choosing to. My mother shook her head, standing abruptly. Well, I hope you're ready for all the responsibility. Home ownership isn't some cute milestone, you'll see. I stood too, slowly. Maybe I will, but I'd rather struggle in my own home than thrive in someone else's shadow. Lauren made a noise of disgust, muttering something about melodrama, but I didn't listen. Because in that moment I saw it in their eyes, something I'd never seen before. Not pride, not joy, fear. They were afraid of losing me, not physically, but strategically. I was no longer the fallback, the easy one, the invisible engine that kept their illusion of family together. I was free. And freedom, I was learning, makes the people who rely on your obedience very uncomfortable. As I gathered my purse and keys, Lauren gave me one final parting shot. Just don't come running back when it all falls apart. I paused in the doorway. I won't, I said, and I meant it. I drove back to Atlanta that night with the windows down, the wind threading through my hair like a promise. The city lights met me like an old friend, but I didn't stop there. I kept driving, right to the lake house. It was empty, still bare. The walls needed paint. The kitchen tiles were chipped. The air smelled like dust and old insulation. But when I stepped inside, it felt like a beginning. For the first time in my life, no one was waiting to tell me who I had to be. I was just Emily, and that was more than enough. Moving day arrived with more cardboard than confidence. I'd rented a U-Haul, bribed 2 coworkers with pizza and gas money, and pulled my hair into a messy bun that had somehow become my signature look. The lake shimmered under the spring sun, birds chirping like they knew I needed something gentle. The house wasn't perfect, but neither was I, and maybe that was the point. I painted the walls myself. Soft sage in the kitchen, pale gray in the living room. It took 3 days and endless coffee, but every brushstroke felt like a declaration. This is mine. I hung the string lights just as the sky turned violet. They draped from the back porch like quiet magic, glowing warm and steady. I put on jazz, Ella Fitzgerald, because her voice sounded like hope that had lived through pain, and I set out mismatched chairs and homemade cupcakes for the people who helped me get here. A small crowd arrived for the housewarming. No big speeches, no catered nonsense, just people who liked me for me. My friend Tanya from work brought a bottle of wine and immediately found the kitchen to help. Jordan brought his guitar. Even Mr. Myers, the elderly man who lived 2 houses down, showed up with a potted fern and said, "Every new home needs something green." I wasn't expecting much from my family. Truthfully, I half hoped they wouldn't come. But they did. Late, of course, my mom walked in first, arms crossed like the walls were judging her. My father followed, sniffing the air like he was inspecting a hotel room he didn't ask for. Then Lauren. She wore white. Who wears white to a house party near a lake? She didn't bring a gift or a smile. Just that look, the one where she tried to read the room, then rewrite it with her own tone. "This is cute," she said after a long pause. "It's home," I replied, handing her a glass of sparkling cider. I'd kept the drinks light partially for myself, partially because I knew my family handled alcohol like gasoline on fire. My mother offered a tight nod as I showed them around. "It's smaller than I imagined." "Well," I said lightly, "I'm only housing myself, not hosting a cult." My dad chuckled, then quickly stopped when Mom gave him that look. The evening wore on. Tanya played bartender. Jordan strummed Moon River on the deck. Laughter floated through the air like perfume. And Lauren stood at the back door, staring out at the lake like it owed her something. When I walked over with a plate of cupcakes, I caught her blinking too quickly. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She scoffed, brushing invisible lint off her sleeve. "Fine, just tired." But her voice cracked on the last word. "What's really going on, Lauren?" She turned to me slowly, and her eyes glistened. I didn't think you'd actually do it." "What? Buy a house, leave, move on." There it was, the crack in the armor. "I thought you'd always be the one who stayed behind," she said softly, "making everyone comfortable, cleaning up the mess." The cupcake plate felt heavy in my hands. "I got tired of waiting for comfort to be offered in return." She blinked hard. "You think it's easy being me, always compared to you." That nearly made me laugh. "Compared to me? Lauren, you were handed a brand new SUV while I begged for tuition money." "And I didn't ask for that," she snapped. "I didn't ask to be treated like the golden child." "No," I said, "but you accepted it, every single time." She looked away. Then, suddenly, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and marched toward our mother, muttering something I couldn't hear. 2 minutes later, I heard her burst into tears. My mother wrapped an arm around her and glared at me like I'd kicked a puppy. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't chase her down. Because for once, I didn't feel responsible for anyone else's discomfort. The party ended in quiet waves of hugs and thank yous. My parents left without much ceremony, but my mother's cold kiss on the cheek lingered like a warning. Lauren didn't say goodbye at all. I stood on the deck long after the last guest left, arms wrapped around myself, the lake wind gentle but firm. There was no regret, just a growing awareness. They were no longer the center of my story, and they knew it. I should have known better than to trust them with anything I loved. But when you're packing for your first solo trip out of the country, sun hats, swimsuits, a stack of travel books you pretend you'll actually read, hope sneaks in like a fool. Costa Rica had been my dream trip for years. A week of quiet beaches and forest hikes. No phones buzzing with family drama. No tension humming under my skin. Just me, the ocean, and the version of myself I was finally learning to like. Before leaving, I made one small, simple decision. I left my parents a note. Just a note. It sat on the kitchen counter next to the aloe plant and a bowl of lemons. "Mom, Dad, if you swing by to check on the house, here are the basics. Water the plants on Sunday. Wi-Fi password is taped under the router. Trash day is Monday, thank you. Emily, I didn't leave keys. I didn't invite them to house sit. I didn't imply they could come and go freely. The note was courtesy, nothing more. But courtesy, apparently, is a door they love to kick open. Costa Rica melted the stress right out of me. I wore sundresses. I drank fresh pineapple juice. I hiked alone and felt unafraid. One night, I sat on the beach watching the purple sunset and thought, this is what my life can be if I protect it. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel tight. No frantic texts. No guilt, just silence. When the plane touched down back in Atlanta, I felt sun-kissed, peaceful, and ready to slip back into my quiet home the way you slip into warm sheets. But the moment I pulled into my driveway, my stomach plummeted. There were shoes outside my front door. 3 pairs. One pair, Lauren's. The others, my father's loafers and my mother's pink slides. My house looked lived in. The porch light was on. Curtains were drawn differently. Someone had placed a welcome mat I definitely hadn't bought. My pulse hammered. I unlocked the door, bracing for a mess. Instead, I stepped into something worse. My father's recliner, his recliner, sat smack in the center of my living room as if it had always belonged there. His jacket hung on the back. His reading glasses were on my coffee table. My mother's tote bag was on the counter. Lauren's makeup bag was open beside my sink. I stumbled deeper inside, heart racing. "Hello," I called. No one answered. But the evidence was everywhere, suitcases stacked by the hallway, half-unpacked grocery bags on the counter, my pantry rearranged, a stack of mail addressed to them sitting where my bills normally went. "This can't be real," I whispered. My house didn't look like someone had checked in. It looked like someone had moved in. I walked to my bedroom, my safe place, only to find my dresser drawers half open, my clothes pushed aside to make space for someone else's sweaters. Heat clawed up my throat. No, 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 no. Then I heard it, footsteps on the stairs. Lauren's voice floated down casually like she lived here. "Dad, did you move my charger?" She stopped mid-step when she saw me. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You're back early." Early? It was 5 p.m. on the exact day I told them I'd return. She didn't look guilty. Or scared, or even surprised. She looked annoyed, as if I'd interrupted her evening. "Lauren," I said, my voice scraping out of me, "why are your shoes at my door? Why is Dad's recliner in my living room? Why is your stuff in my dresser?" She lifted one shoulder. "We're a family, Emily." The casual cruelty in her tone made my skin go cold. "This is our home too," she said, "our home." I felt something inside me stop like the moment before glass shatters. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a takeover. And I knew, without seeing them yet, that my parents were behind it. I could hear drawers opening upstairs, my father humming, my mother talking on the phone like she owned the place. My peaceful week vanished like smoke. They had walked right into my life, into my home, and claimed it as if I didn't exist. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Lauren stood halfway down the stairs, arms crossed over her chest like she was defending her territory. Behind her, I heard the faint thump of drawers being shut and my father's low humming, completely at ease in my house, in my space, in the life I built without them. I stepped forward slowly, forcing air into my lungs. "Where," I said carefully, "are Mom and Dad?" Lauren brushed past me as if I were a lamp she needed to get around. "Kitchen," she muttered. "Dad got hungry." Hungry. That single word almost made me laugh, because anger and disbelief were colliding inside me and the alternative was screaming. I followed the sound of voices and found my parents sitting at my kitchen island like they were hosting Sunday brunch. My mother was cutting into a slice of quiche I didn't recognize. My father was scrolling through TV channels on the small counter screen I kept for background noise. My mother looked up first. "Oh, good," she said airily. "You're home." Not surprised, not sorry. Just mildly put out, as though I'd shown up early to a reservation. I gripped the edge of the island. "Why are you here?" My father didn't look up. "Your mother's talking." "Why?" I repeated louder. "Are you in my house?" Mom set down her fork, sighed dramatically, and spoke with the exhausted authority of someone explaining basic math to a toddler. "Emily, stop making this so tense. We sold the old house." I froze. "You, what?" "We sold it," she said again, flipping her wrist like it was a casual errand. "The market was good, and honestly, we didn't need that big of a place anymore." My mouth went dry. "So you sold your house and moved into mine." "It's not your house," Lauren called from the living room, flipping through a fashion magazine. "It's ours." My father finally looked up. "Don't start dramatics. Families help each other. This is the family home now." Family home. They said it like a decree. Like it had already been decided and I was late to my own sentencing. I steadied myself against the counter. "You told me you'd barely come by. You said you didn't want to." "That was before we made this decision," Mom cut in. "And it's not like you need all this space. You're barely here." My voice trembled. "I worked for this. I bought this. I didn't ask you for a dime." My mother's lips thinned. "And aren't you proud of that? But don't weaponize it. We're not letting you push us out." Push them out. Of my house, the world tilted. Lauren sauntered in, leaning against the fridge like she owned it. "Look, Em, you got a cute little lake place. We needed somewhere to go. It's not that deep." I took a shaky breath. "When did you move in?" 2 days ago," she said, shrugging. "We needed time to get settled before you came back. You left all these plants. I watered the one that looked thirsty." I looked toward the living room. My monstera, the one I bobbied for years, was wilted and drooping in a corner behind my father's recliner. My father's recliner, my living room. My chest began to shake. "You can't do this," I whispered. "You can't just decide my home belongs to you." "We already did," Mom replied. "And it's for the best," Dad added, as if issuing a kind decree. "We're consolidating. No point wasting money on 2 mortgages when we can all just live together." I stared at him. "It's not a family mortgage. It's my mortgage." "That attitude," he said, sitting straighter, "is exactly why we didn't tell you sooner." Lauren chimed in, bored of the topic already. "Stop fighting it. You'll get used to having us around. We're fun." Her phone buzzed. She answered it with a grin and walked off, leaving my mother to give me the tired, disappointed look she'd perfected years ago. "Honestly, Emily," she said, "try to be grateful. Some people would love to have their family close." Grateful. My hands were shaking. They weren't visiting. They weren't checking in. They weren't confused. They had moved in, deliberately, confidently, permanently, and they believed, truly believed, they had the right to. My voice finally found its way back up my throat, sharper than before. "You need to leave." My mother scoffed. "This is our home, too." My father folded his arms. "We're not going anywhere." And in that icy kitchen, with my own furniture pushed aside and my life rearranged like clutter, I realized something terrifying. They weren't planning on leaving. Not today, not ever. They had claimed my home as theirs. And they believed I was powerless to stop it. That night I sat in my car until my legs went numb. The engine was off, the street quiet, the lake just visible beyond the windshield. Inside my house, my family was laughing. I could hear it faintly through the windows. The same people who called me dramatic, selfish, cold, were now helping themselves to my furniture, my fridge, my life. And the worst part? They acted like it was normal. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was 17. I cried. Not polite, single-tear crying. The kind where your breath catches in your throat and the ache doesn't come from sadness but betrayal. They hadn't just taken over my house. They'd erased me from it. The next morning, I called a locksmith before sunrise. He arrived in a dusty van with country music playing softly through the open window. He didn't ask questions, just changed every lock with swift, practiced movements while I stood there with a to-go coffee and a heart pounding like I was committing a felony on my own property. By noon, they were locked out. By 2, I was curled on the sofa, watching shadows move across my living room in silence, wondering how long it would last. The answer: less than 24 hours. The knock came at 8:17 a.m. the next day. 3 sharp raps, no doorbell, no texts first. Then my mother's voice. "Emily, open this door now." I didn't move. Then came the sound of footsteps and metal. I ran to the door just as it opened from the outside. Lauren stepped in first, followed by my father, holding hands with a man in a tan jumpsuit, a locksmith. "Did you seriously change the locks?" Lauren asked, like I'd rearranged the spice rack without consulting her. I stepped back, stunned. How did you get in?" My dad pulled out a receipt. "We hired our own locksmith. It's still technically our address now." "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's not. It's my name on the deed, my mortgage." My mother entered last, holding a grocery bag and a tight, triumphant smile. "Enough with the territorial tantrum, Emily," she said, brushing past me into the kitchen. "We're here to stay." I stared at the stranger still standing in my doorway. The locksmith looked uncomfortable. "They said it was their family home," he mumbled, already backing away. "Didn't know there was a dispute." He left before I could say anything else. My father dumped his keys back on the counter. "We're not leaving every time you throw a fit." I clenched my fists. "You broke into my house." "No," my mother said, unloading almond milk and strawberries into my fridge. "We entered the home we now share." "You don't share it," I snapped. "You sold your house without telling me and decided I'd absorb the fallout." She shrugged. "It made financial sense. And now you're just living off of me." Lauren sauntered in, holding a mug that wasn't hers. "Well, if you're gonna be all dramatic about it, yes." That's when the real reason tumbled out. My father sat at the kitchen island and said, "We used the proceeds from the old house." I blinked. "On what?" He didn't flinch. "Trips, a new massage chair. Lauren needed some things for her room." Lauren grinned, sipping from her mug. "It vibrates and changes color. You used the equity from your house on gadgets and spa days." My mother gave me a look of bored defense. "We deserved a break. We've worked hard." My jaw dropped. "And now you're just what, squatting in my home?" "Stop using that word," she snapped. "You make it sound ugly." "It is ugly," I shouted, my voice finally cracking. "This is theft. You've taken everything I worked for and turned it into your safety net." Lauren leaned in. "Or maybe it was never just yours." And just like that, I saw it clearly. They didn't feel guilty. They felt entitled. They believed my success was theirs by default, that I owed them my house, my peace, my freedom, because they happened to share my last name. That night, I lay awake on the couch, lights off, every sound amplified. The dishwasher running. My mother's TV murmuring upstairs. Lauren's laughter echoing from the bathroom, where she'd apparently decided to try out a new face mask. I didn't cry this time. I didn't scream. I planned. Because if they thought I'd let them steal my life and call it love, they had no idea who I had become. Work had been brutal that day. Back-to-back meetings. A last-minute deadline. The kind of migraine that starts behind your eye and works its way down into your bones. All I wanted was to go home, put on pajamas, eat leftover pasta, and sleep for 12 hours straight. Instead, I walked into hell. I smelled it before I saw it. That sour mix of cheap beer, body spray, and something burnt. My stomach clenched. I pushed the door open, praying I was wrong. I wasn't. My living room looked like a frat house collision scene. Red Solo cups across the floor like confetti, pizza boxes stacked like toppled bricks, half-eaten wings on my coffee table, and sticky dark stains on the rug I'd bought the week after moving in. Some stranger, was snoring on my couch. Another person I'd never seen curled up in my reading chair like a hibernating raccoon. A third was passed out on the floor with a backpack under his head. I stood there frozen, hand still on the doorknob. This wasn't just messy, this was violation. My chest tightened. "Lauren," I shouted, my voice sharp enough to cut. Nothing. I tried again, louder. "Lauren." A few bodies stirred. One guy blinked up at me, confused. "Do you live here?" "My home," I said through clenched teeth. "Get out!" He scrambled up and tripped over a cup, muttering apologies. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, lazy, unbothered. Lauren appeared at the landing, hair in a messy bun, holding a bag of chips she clearly didn't pay for. She looked down at the scene as if she were casually observing a mild inconvenience. "Oh," she said, crunching loudly. "You're home early." Early, again with that word. It was 7:12 p.m. I had work, I said, voice trembling with rage. "A job, the job that pays for this house you're trashing." She shrugged. "We were just hanging out. Chill." I gestured around at the mess, the stains, the strangers, the disaster zone that used to be my safe place. "This is not hanging out. This is a party," she laughed. "It wasn't even big, just a few friends." "A few friends," I echoed. "There are 3 strangers passed out in my living room. One of them drooled on my couch." She rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting, again." That word again hit like a slap, as if my boundaries were tantrums, as if my exhaustion was theatrics. A girl I didn't know stumbled out of the kitchen holding my favorite mug, now filled with beer. "Where's the bathroom?" she slurred. I pointed at the door. "Out, the bathroom is out." I didn't care where she went. I didn't care what she thought of me. Every minute they stayed was another minute stolen from me. Lauren's expression shifted into that mocking half-smile I'd known since childhood. "You're always so uptight, Em. No wonder you don't have friends." Something in my chest snapped like a cheap pencil. "Everyone out," I said, my voice trembling but louder than before. "Now." A few of the strangers laughed, but the look in my eyes must have convinced them. They started gathering their things. Shoes thudded, doors opened, apologies mumbled, someone asked where their vape was, and I didn't care. They left, all of them except Lauren. She stayed on the stairs, crossing her arms like a defiant teenager. "You're ridiculous." "I'm exhausted," I corrected. "And this is my home," she snorted. "You keep saying that. But we're a family, families share." I turned slowly to face her. "Not like this," I said. "Not with disrespect, not with strangers passed out on my property, not after breaking into my house, not after treating me like a guest in my own life." Her eyes narrowed. "Well, maybe if you weren't so selfish." "Selfish," my voice cracked. "I built this place on my own. I worked for it. I paid for it. I earned it. And all you've done since you arrived is destroy it." She hesitated, just a flicker of doubt, and then buried it under another eye roll. "You're blowing everything out of proportion." No, I was seeing it clearly. The mess, the entitlement, the danger of letting this go any further. My hands shook as I gathered empty cups into a trash bag, my breath unsteady, my throat tight. Lauren wandered back upstairs, muttering something about me being unhinged. Maybe I was. Or maybe, for the first time, I was finally awake. As I cleaned, as I scrubbed beer from the tile and picked glitter out of the rug fibers, one thought pulsed through my mind like a heartbeat. They will not do this to me again. This wasn't just a mess. It was the last straw. By the next morning, the house still smelled faintly of stale beer and the cheap cologne one of those strangers had spilled on my rug. I hadn't slept. I'd sat on the edge of my bed. Well, the narrow sliver my mother hadn't filled with her sweaters, staring at the wall until dawn softened it. I felt empty. Not broken. Not dramatic. Just done. There's a moment, I think, when someone crosses a line so far you stop trying to push them back. You simply step out of the ring. And for the first time in my life, I understood that silence can be louder than shouting. At 8 a.m., I slipped into the backyard, phone pressed to my ear. My parents were inside arguing about whether to order brunch or make pancakes. Lauren was blasting music upstairs. None of them noticed me. The realtor answered on the second ring. "This is Maria," she said in a warm, clipped tone. "How can I help you today?" "I want to sell my house," I said. The words tasted like steel, cold, sharp, final. She hesitated. "All right, when were you thinking?" "As soon as possible." We set up the listing in 10 minutes. She said Lake properties were selling fast, something about demand, market trends, the usual realtor optimism, but all I heard was possibility, escape, oxygen. When I hung up, my hands were trembling, not with fear but relief. I didn't tell my family, not because I wanted revenge, but because they had already proven what they do with information: twist it, weaponize it, assume ownership of it. Silence was my only leverage, my only boundary left. By noon, I'd packed 2 duffel bags, clothes, laptop, essentials. The rest could stay. Let them fight over furniture that wasn't theirs. Let them argue about where to put the recliner once the walls belonged to someone else. I walked down the hallway quietly, stepping over Lauren's discarded shoes, ignoring my mother's purse on the counter, not looking at the framed photo my father had placed on a shelf as if marking territory. I didn't leave a note. They'd taken enough from me, my peace, my space, my trust. They didn't deserve explanations, too. I slipped out the front door and locked it behind me. It wouldn't matter soon, the locks would belong to someone else, but it felt symbolically right. My coworker, Jessa, who'd become more of a friend than I expected, opened her apartment door with wide eyes and a worried smile. "You okay?" she asked, stepping aside so I could enter. I set my bags down and exhaled. "Not really," I admitted. "But I will be." She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. She handed me a mug of tea and pointed toward the small guest room. "Stay as long as you need." I almost cried, not from sadness, but from the strange comfort of someone offering space without strings. That night, Maria texted me, "2 showings scheduled tomorrow, expect fast offers." I stared at the message for a long moment, my heart beating slowly, steadily, like it was finally reclaiming its own rhythm. My family didn't know. They thought I was at work. They thought they had won something, taken something, claimed something. But the house was no longer theirs to occupy. The future buyers didn't know yet either. Tomorrow, they'd walk through the door my parents thought they controlled. Everything was already in motion. Quiet, clean, unstoppable. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not peacefully, but with a small spark of satisfaction warming me from the inside. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't confrontation, it's disappearance. And mine had already begun. The morning the new owners were scheduled to arrive, I was already parked down the street, far enough to stay hidden, close enough to watch it unfold. Maria had called earlier, voice brisk with excitement. "They're early birds. Young couple, great credit, moving fast, keys at noon." "Perfect," I said. I sat in my car with the windows cracked and the engine off, heart thudding like I was waiting for a fire to start. But in truth, the fire had been burning for months. I was just here to watch it catch up. At 11:58 a.m., Maria's SUV pulled into the driveway, followed by a silver sedan. I saw the couple step out, mid-30s, bright-eyed, holding hands like they believed in fresh starts. Maria waved at them and rang the doorbell. And then, everything began to unravel. Inside, my family must have assumed it was a mistake. I imagined my mother smoothing her hair, my father grumbling about salespeople. Maybe Lauren peeked out from upstairs, irritated that anyone dared disturb her morning. But when the door opened, Maria stepped inside like she belonged there, because she did. She gestured for the couple to follow. They didn't hesitate. A minute later, the shouting started. My mother's voice first, sharp, high, indignant. Then Lauren's, shrieking something about "this is a joke." My father's voice rumbled underneath, demanding someone call the police. I waited a beat longer before I stepped out of my car and walked toward the house. Maria spotted me from the porch and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. "There you are," she said. The couple turned toward me, surprised. I smiled politely. "Welcome." My mother appeared in the doorway just as I reached the steps. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. "What is going on?" she hissed. "I sold the house," I said simply. My father stormed into view. "You did what?" "Sold it," I repeated, pulling the keys from my pocket. "Legally, quietly, permanently." "You can't do that," Lauren shouted, appearing behind them in a robe and bare feet. "You didn't even tell us." "I didn't need to," I replied. "Because this was never your home. You decided to squat here, remember?" My mother looked like she might faint. "You betrayed us." I looked her dead in the eyes. "No, you betrayed me, you used me, and now you're going to leave." The new owners stood slightly back, clearly uncomfortable but waiting, watching. Maria remained calm, flipping through the closing papers. They've already signed everything. Funds transferred, title cleared, we're done here. My father's voice rose. We are not leaving this house. Then the woman, Madeline, I'd learned her name, was pulled out her phone. If they don't leave, we'll need to call the police. My family froze. For the first time since this began, they looked unsure, unsteady. Lauren grabbed her phone. You can't just throw us out. This is harassment. I held up the keys, then handed them to Madeline. You're the owners now. Do whatever you need to. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. You'll regret this, my father said, stepping toward me. I stepped back. I already regret letting you in. He faltered. And that's when the door closed behind me, because it wasn't my door anymore. I walked back to my car without looking over my shoulder, even as the yelling rose again. Maria would handle it. So would the police if it came to that. I had no more words to give. I turned the engine on and drove away. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was escaping. I felt like I was arriving somewhere new, somewhere mine. Blue lights flickered across the front lawn. 2 patrol cars, polite but firm. The neighbors peeked through blinds. A jogger paused with their earbuds halfway in, sensing something more dramatic than a noise complaint. I didn't linger. I parked at the end of the street, far enough to avoid the chaos but close enough to see what I needed. The officers stepped into the house with professional efficiency, explaining calmly that the deed had changed hands, that refusal to leave would be considered trespassing. My father tried arguing. My mother went red in the face. Lauren threw what looked like a sandal, but the law didn't care about tantrums. 15 minutes later, they were out, all of them. Standing on the lawn among 3 garbage bags, 2 half-packed suitcases, and a confused golden retriever they must have been pet-sitting. I got out of my car and walked toward them. My father spotted me first. His face fell. There was no arrogance left, just raw, unfiltered disbelief. Emily, he said, stepping forward as one of the officers turned to intervene. Please, don't do this to your own blood. I stopped a few feet away. I'm not doing this to you, I said. You did this to yourselves. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. From the back seat of my car, I pulled out a rolled-up canvas bag. Brand new, still had the Walmart tag. I walked over and dropped it gently on the lawn between them. A tent, Lauren barked. Are you serious? It sleeps 4, I said. You'll figure it out. My mother's eyes burned holes into me. You're leaving us on the street. No, I said, turning away. I'm letting you start over. I didn't wait for the reply. Didn't need to hear the final accusations, the guilt-tripping, the desperate rewrites of what had happened. Some exits deserve no dramatic monologue, just silence. As I slid back into the driver's seat and pulled away, I glanced one last time in the rearview mirror. They were still standing there, Lauren fuming, my mother speechless, my father gripping the tent like it might change something. But it wouldn't. Nothing would. Not this time. It's been a year. 12 months since the day I handed my family a tent and drove away without looking back. Since then, the lake house belongs to someone else, and I've never once regretted letting it go. My new condo is smaller, but every inch feels like mine. Morning light spills across the hardwood floors. I bought the curtains myself. There's a coffee shop downstairs where the barista knows my name, and I walk to work now, heels clicking, head high. But it's not just the condo. It's the life. I started a mentorship foundation for girls in tech. It's something I used to dream about when I was studying in that tiny dorm, hunched over a borrowed textbook with coffee in hand and exhaustion in my spine. Now I get to help girls like me, smart, overlooked, underestimated, build their own exits from places that never saw them clearly. Last week, I was featured in a local magazine. That's when the message came. Hey, Em, can we talk? It was my mother, then my father, then Lauren. All polite, all vague, all so different from the chaos they left behind. I agreed to meet at a cafe downtown. Neutral ground. They arrived 10 minutes late. Of course, my father looked tired. My mother's nails were chipped. Lauren wore a grocery store apron over her hoodie. They sat down slowly like the weight of the past year had finally reached their bones. We need help, my dad started. My mother sighed. We're trying to buy a new house. Lauren stayed quiet, staring into her tea. I nodded slowly. I figured. We thought, my mom said carefully, maybe you could help a loan just to get back on our feet. I didn't speak for a long moment. Then I pulled a folder from my bag and laid it flat on the table. Here are the terms, I said. They stared at it like it might bite. It's a legal loan, I continued. Clear boundaries, clear repayment, no co-signing, no shared property. If you want help, you follow the structure. My father glanced at it, jaw tightening. My mother said nothing. Lauren finally looked at me, and for the first time in forever, she didn't roll her eyes. She didn't scoff or smirk or posture. She nodded, just once. I don't know if they'll sign. I don't know if they'll change. But I do know this, they will never again have power over me. Not my home, not my mind, not my peace. This is my life now. And they're welcome to watch from the other side of the line.